Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Prez, and this is episode 250. We made it all the way here. I don't know how, but somehow we got here a quarter of the way to 1,000, apparently. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Prez, that is at Presidente on Twitter. Prez, how are you?
I'm good. I have continued I think this is the third week of me not watching games live and watching them like the day after or the day after that. Can confirm, unsurprisingly, that my mental health has soared spectacularly since implementing this. It hasn't been on purpose. It's just kind of happened, but I think I'm going to keep doing this.
I would actually appreciate if you don't keep doing it because there's nothing more annoying than you messaging me 15 times the next day, like, "Oh man, this layup by RJ was really bad." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I watched it last night. I don't want to relive it." But we are joined by a very special guest. I believe it's his second time on this pod. His name is Mike Vorkunov. He is a national writer, basketball and business reporter for The Athletic. Mike, that's at Mike Vorkunov on Twitter. Mike, how are you?
What's going on, guys? What's going on? Yeah, I think it's the second time. Oh, might be the third. I think I had to bail on you guys after like 45 minutes because I had a phone call coming in.
Yeah, it might have been, but I think that was like before we were on Pod Strickland. I think that was when we were still over on PNT. So, second time on this pod, third time altogether. Glad to have you on. Before we get started, I have to make a few announcements. The Strickland has an Instagram. You should
Plot twist.
Yes, exactly. Plot twist. We have an Instagram. Subscribe to that. Check it out. It is at thestrick.land on Instagram, just like it's the website, the Strickland, thestrick.land. Check that out. There's a lot of fun stuff that we're doing on there that we're adding to. Look forward to more. We also have a YouTube channel where this podcast, which if you're watching it on YouTube. It'll be posted right there. So hit like, subscribe, help us get to 1,000. It is a big help if you do. We also have a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this pod that I do every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland mailbag that comes out every other week that is hosted by Andrew Steele and Dallas Amico, the Doug bag, as we like to call it. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops, for better or worse. Probably for worse, but it never stops. It's very exciting. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more, if you can possibly imagine. You also get access to wonderful weekly articles by Jack Huntley and Matthew Miranda, two of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. So, without further ado, let's get started. The Knicks lost a basketball game. They also won a basketball game against Detroit. We cannot forget that. Very, very it was a key game. They managed to handle their business, but Knicks also lost a game to the Bucks yesterday by 6, 109-103. It was a very close game. Of course, Grayson Allen hit the most annoying shot ever because he's the most annoying human being ever. And so that happened. So I guess, we live in the minutia of the Knicks day in, day out. Mike, luckily you no longer have to do this as you're no longer the beat reporter of the Knicks, but I think you still keep up with the team. So I'm curious to just kind of get like your thoughts on what you've seen so far this year, kind of their moves in the offseason, and just kind of where things are because, I'm sure from your bird's eye view, you can see that the angst among the fan base is building. So I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I still follow you guys all on Twitter. There's a lot of agita every day. I feel like you're just white knuckling through every day. It's not healthy, probably. I can see it.
Mike knows.
Yeah.
You guys are just angrier. There's more like angry media tweets. There's more angry everything tweets. I was actually there. Was it last night for the Bucks game?
Oh wow.
Which was an interesting experience, as you said. Grayson Allen kind of finished them off there.
Did Leon talk to you on the record?
I actually saw Leon pregame. I said hello. That was a rarity. I think that was maybe the second time I've talked to him in 3 years now. No, so I mean, listen, upside, you're tied for 10th, right? In the play-in tournaments, the Knicks and the Heat, they're tied for 10th. It's just like the old days. But I think, for someone who was very heavily involved in, or really just, in the minutia, right, of it, and now just taking the bigger picture, I think a lot of the problems are just kind of, really it's a lack of clarity of where they're going, and where this is all leading to. I think the presuming thought about the Knicks is always like, okay, at some point they're trying to acquire a superstar, but this is year 3 now of this current regime, and their one chance at a superstar, their one realistic chance at a superstar has gone by, and I'm sure we can get into that trade if you'd like. But it's really just trying to look for clarity of where this is all going and what that next step will be, because at some point you have to make one big leap, or try to, at least, because in New York, the way I always describe it, I was trying to tell Fred when he took over the job, is like, you can't always think about the Knicks in purely rational terms, because they don't always operate in purely rational terms, just because of where the ownership is. That's not always an assessment of the front office or the coach. It's just kind of the situation as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about, the lack of clarity, that's probably the most frustrating part. And like, this is where I think it's weird, because people are like, well, there's no clarity, like they're not talking to anybody. And I'm sure you know this. I don't really care that they don't talk to me or you or anybody, but like, I think the lack of clarity comes through anyway, because like, we're seeing it with the roster. Like last night is a perfect example, and what we've seen throughout this year is a perfect example. Emmanuel Quickly, throughout 2 years in his career, I think he's obviously vastly outperformed expectations of when you take somebody at the 25th pick. I thought he acquitted himself very well last year in a lot of weird and strange circumstances, we can just say. And it's like, where are you headed, right? So, second-year player, finishes the year super strong. Okay, you signed Jalen Brunson. Personally, like, there are people that have a really big problem with that, because it's like, no, just, play quickly. And I think it's fine. I think most people are like, Brunson's really good. That's fine. Like, they can play together, and then you give Quickly the backup point guard spots. But Tom Thibodeau is our head coach. And as long as Tom Thibodeau is our head coach, we have one Derrick Rose on this roster who he will go down with, they will go down together with the ship. And like yesterday, you saw, right? Brunson picks up some weird injury to start the game. And who's the first sub? Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose comes in. He plays the backup point guard minutes. And we've seen this now that, like, especially since he's going back to the 10-man rotation, Derrick Rose is the first guard off the bench. And not just he's the first guard off the bench, he's basically the only other person on the team that's getting point guard reps other than Jalen Brunson. Because if you look at Quickly's minutes, since we've gone back to this 10-man rotation, it has been that when he's in the game, he's either in the game with Derrick Rose or he's in the game with Jalen Brunson. And that, to me, encapsulates, like, what are we doing? Because to me, it's like, when they traded for Derrick Rose their first year together, and, they make this magical fucking, 41 win run and everything, it's fine. But I think, like, you're at the point now where it's like, you have outgrown Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose does not really serve a purpose for your team in the short run, and he definitely doesn't matter to your team in the long run. So why is he here now taking minutes? And it's not just Quickly, because there's a trickle-down effect of his minutes, right? It takes minutes away from Quickly. It effectively takes minutes away from Grimes, and it takes away minutes from Cam. And it's like, why is that happening given where you are? Because I think it's safe to say, and maybe even reasonable to say, that, like, whatever your goals are for this year, forget the long term, just for this year, I don't think your goals are materially being moved one way or the other with or without Derrick Rose. So at that point, why would you not play Derrick Rose? Like, why would you play him? Because it just doesn't really make sense to me to not give those minutes to younger players who, one, you need more information on for whatever decisions you're going to make on them, and two, like, they need minutes, and maybe they can surprise you, because young players can surprise you.
We see it up and down the roster where this front office's approach is very hands-off with Thibs, which is not unusual. There's a zillion front offices where, they don't interfere with the coach's rotations. That's actually most front offices, I'm pretty sure. Where the disconnect is that we have no way of, like, confirming this, but with a lot of the players who this front office drafts or trades for or signs, Thibs uses them in a really, really different way that is often counterproductive. And faced with that conflict of like, okay, our person who we acquired is not being used how we envisioned it, they're content to just let it live rather than push Thibs on the issue. When the proper role and the acquisition aligns, it works out wonderfully, right? Like Cam Reddish this season is an example of that. Like last year he didn't play. This year, their vision of Cam, which was role player Cam, right? Not hot sauce Cam, is something that Thibs was like, I can get behind. And he has. And it's been pretty awesome. But unfortunately, that's been the exception. And, this has not been surprising. The double-edged sword of Thibs is when he gets players in the right roles, he gets such good buy-in that often teams can overperform, but there's always a high risk of him just miscasting guys completely. Hartenstein comes to mind as the most crazy examples. Like he literally has like one, like all the internet pop-ups, like one special trick. He literally has one special trick, which is like dime off like crazy from the top of the key. And Thibs is like, no, you will be doing no diming off.
Just be Mitchell Robinson.
Right. So like, and there's no way the front office signed this guy who's clear. What differentiates him from other centers is that specific ability, along with his nifty little floater. But they're very hands off. They're with him. I think they make decisions. They prefer to make decisions about this stuff and have these conversations in the off season, not during the season.
I have a question regarding that for you, Mike. So like last year, right, when they acquired Cam Reddish, it became this like weird thing where if you trade a protected first for a guy who has a year and a half left before he enters restricted free agency, the underlying assumption is like the front office wants to see that guy play, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there were reports that they did talk to Thibs about this before they made the deal. Thibs didn't want them to do the deal. They did it anyway. So like there's been people, Knicks fans and writers and stuff that are like, well, they're not listening to Thibs, like they're not on the same page. And I can like kind of understand that. Okay, maybe they're not on the same page. Hartenstein might be another example of this. But to me, I have a hard time agreeing with the idea they're not totally on the same page. Whereas like we know Thibs' history with front offices previously. Like I think they might very well communicate this stuff to him, and he's just like he does his own thing. Like he's like, that's great that you have input. But
yeah, that's how that's 100%.
Yeah, it's like
I know you didn't ask me, but
no, it's like the Colonel Jessup thing in A Few Good Men, right? He's like, I run my unit how I run my unit. Like that's Thibs. And do you think that's fair to say, or do you think that like the front office does owe it to him that if he does express like with the centers, we know exactly what he wants from his centers. Do you think it's wrong of them to bring in a player like Hartenstein who is totally different from them and expect Thibs to adjust to that?
Well, look, I think, just listening to you guys there on the whole Thibs issue that you were guys talking about, it was obviously weighted in a way that's like dismissive of Thibs, right? You're saying he's playing these players out of the roles that they should be doing. And I would say that if it was kind of a healthier organization, right, you would have that sort of alignment to the front office 100%. And the head coach, right? And so you can take it one way. You can say, look, they brought in Isaiah Hartenstein. He likes to play in a different way. He's not a Mitch, right? He's not a Mitch clone. He has a certain skill set. And he's doing something now in a way that probably doesn't accentuate his best traits, right? You can say the same thing about what Cam was last year when he just straight up just didn't play, right? Like they traded for him, they traded him first, and then we just never saw Cam Reddish again for a while.
He played the Kevin Knox role.
Right. So there's, I would say, I think one of the interesting things about, at least early on when Thibs got there and this regime got there, was that Thibs, from my understanding, was involved a good deal in the player acquisition part, right? Mm-hmm. And so you ended up getting players who kind of fit into what he's doing. And when you hire someone like Tom Thibodeau, you're not expecting him to be kind of like a patsy, right? Like it's not baseball where you're hiring the manager as a middle manager for what the front office wants to do.
Looking at you, Aaron Boone, fucking bum.
Right? And as you said,
the wound is still fresh.
There's some organizations maybe where that happens. But that's also probably with younger head coaches, less experienced head coaches. Like you hire Tom Thibodeau because you need all the best parts of Tom Thibodeau, right? And so to continuously bring in players who don't fulfill roles that he likes and play the way that he likes. And by now, I think everyone kind of knows what Tom Thibodeau likes and the way he likes to play offense and defense. I think that's also an issue with the front office too, right? Like it's you repeatedly trying to get players that you think are good, not understanding what will happen once they get on the team, right? Like that's mismanagement on both ends. And I think, and this is not me trying to, stand up for Tom Thibodeau, but it's got to be both ways. It's not just a one person issue, right? And by now, you know what Thibs wants, and you know why he plays some of the guys he does, right? And so I think to continuously think that you can acquire someone who will just like not fit that role and he'll be the guy who breaks the mold, I don't know. That seems foolhardy.
It is. So it is 100%. I think this is what, like, if you listen to a podcast from like 80 episodes ago, we're like, why can't Thibs just like be smart and not stupid about players with cool skills? But the last like 50 episodes or so is very much like, okay, like exactly what you said, Mike. Like, you know what's going to happen when you bring these guys. Like, you know there's going to be some shenanigans with the roles with everybody except for like Derrick Rose and centers for the most part. And he's managed to even do that with centers now.
And I think there's actually, there's two consistent things that Tom Thibodeau wants in his teams, right? Offensively, let's say, but like he wants a guard who can get downhill to break down the defense. He wants that, and that's why he'll play Derrick Rose at the point guard role instead of Emmanuel Quickly, because that's Derrick Rose's strength, right? As opposed to Quickly, who's a little more, let's say, laterally oriented.
The best example of this was Elf, right? The first year, because it was like,
Elf was.
Yeah.
Listen,
that's also why
I
keep getting
diminishing returns many games before the end of the season. But nonetheless, that's just what he likes, and he likes his rim protection on defense, and he likes his guys to play that way. And he's got a certain role for them in the offense as well. And it works too, right? But I think he's also shown some leeway to change. Like you look at the offensive profile of the Knicks over the last 3 years and the way it's changed and the way it's kind of gone to the extremes and 3-point rates, floaters, like all these things. He's shown malleability there. And that I think is kind of more in line with probably what the front office wants and what the analytics and strategy team wants. And they just, nonetheless, there's, they're at loggerheads. And by when I say where is a lack of clarity, I wasn't talking about, Leon Rose talking to the media or not talking to the media. I mean, like literally Michael Scott style, I declare bankruptcy, tell me what we're doing in 5 years. Like I meant like more so what is the plan? And I think people around the league are also asking that same question about the Knicks. Like I talk to people, I'm like, hey, what do you think of the Knicks? And a lot of the responses are like, what do you think of the Knicks? And I'm like, I don't know. It's hard to figure out sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by lack of clarity. And you have that lack of cohesion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to go back to what you're talking about with Thibs, like I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. So what I think people and just in general, like zooming back out, looking back, like when it started, right? Leon gets hired. Leon's never been a front office exec before, right? Yeah, he's run an agency. He did that very successfully. He's delegated tasks. I'm sure. Like he has obviously a lot of experience in management of some kind, and he has experience in basketball, but he does not have experience of running an organization, a basketball team, right? Okay, so what does he do? He hires, obviously, people in the front office, roll out West, his right-hand man, but then he goes out, okay, he gets a Brock Aller from Cleveland, he gets a Walt Perrin from Utah. Like, he gets some experienced execs to kind of fill in spots around him, right? And I think that makes sense. So then you're like, okay, how do I handle the coaching piece of this? And for that, right, he interviews, like if you actually look back at the guys they interviewed, a lot of these guys ended up becoming, it was like Ime Udoka was one, Jamal Mosley was another one. I think they had
Will Hardy.
Will Hardy. So they interviewed all these like wonderkins. Though I guess we don't know where Ime Udoka stands right now, so we'll just leave that guy alone. But like they interview all these smarter, younger minds. And then they settle on Tom Thibodeau, which I do understand is like, even if you want to say he was always going to be the guy, I do get like the idea of, okay, look, this is my first time doing it. Let me pick a guy that I know. And I know like one thing we can say about Thibs is you're never going to have to wonder what he wants, right? Like we said, like we know there are things he wants and desires. So you go with the known quantity. You worked with this guy. You know this guy probably better than anybody else. Okay, cool. What I think is the really frustrating part, I can only speak for myself, and I think I can speak for Prez here too, is I agree with I'm fine with that. And I do actually think Thibs has done, and I've talked about this endlessly. I've actually defended Thibs in this. You might be surprised. I actually think he's a pretty good development coach. I do think he's a good development coach. But at some point in development of players, you have to be able to trust them in bigger roles, bigger responsibilities on the floor. And that's the part he has struggled with now for the better part of a year. And that to me is the frustrating part for when evaluating the front office, because I do like a lot of the moves they've made. I like getting Brunson. I thought that move was really good. I don't care that they could have drafted Jalen Williams and AJ Griffin. They traded out, they cleared a bunch of dudes that we wanted to get rid of anyway. They signed a point guard, which last time you came on, we argued about should they go for Chris Paul or not. And lo and behold, they got a point guard, which I wanted and which you advocated for at the time. So they get Jalen Brunson. I like that move. I think that's an investment into your young players. Actually, I think a guy like that helps put them into right roles. I like the Cam Reddish move. I like that you buy low on a talent and you trust your development staff. And I think I'm not going to say they've won that trade, but it's definitely not a dud. There's something there with Cam.
He seems better this year.
Yeah, we've seen him grow. And Thibs deserves credit for that, but the front office deserves credit for that, because if they listened to Thibs, he wouldn't be here. I like the way, I think they've drafted well, even if they haven't drafted the perfect guy at every slot. I think they've drafted good players. They've done things I like. But then I'm like, okay, but what's the plan? You drafted OB 8th, Julius Randle's still here. You added Hartenstein in the summer. Do you have any plan to get OB on the floor more? Emmanuel Quickley is still here. Why are you still playing Derrick Rose? Quentin Grimes is here. Why the hell did you ever let Tom Thibodeau say Evan Fournier was the grandfathered in starter? I just don't understand that part of it. And then while I disagree with the notion of this kind of argument that's come about where it's well, if they were going to do all this, why didn't they just trade for Donovan Mitchell? I don't agree with that logic, but I do understand why people feel that way, because you're well, what is the point of having all of these various things if you're not really doing anything to prioritize them? And I think that is the really, when you see the agita and the angst of Knicks fans on Twitter, I think, and the whole not knowing the plan, right? It's because you're there's these things that are good, and then there are these things that you are maintaining that make no sense with them. So what is the plan? And it's your plan, if your plan is just, we want to trade for a star, I'm fine with that plan. I actually think that's a fine plan. But guess what? To do that, you have to really prioritize your young players and let them take their lumps, on the floor. And it's okay if you want to bring in a Brunson to kind of help them take their lumps. But when you have Brunson and you have Randall and then you have Thibs overseeing this whole thing and how he distributes minutes and does rotations and all that stuff, it just doesn't really feel like the overarching plan. It seems very disparate. It feels like there's very two sides of this that are not meeting anyway. And if you look back at that your own Weitzman article, the first one, right, that about that look into the Knicks, you can kind of sense it then too. And it's there never has been that. It doesn't feel like they've ever actually come together. It just feels like they had this season the first year around where everything just kind of worked. And since then they've been battling to just get on the same page, and maybe they're not even battling to get on the same page. It feels like there's two different sides of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first year was so weird. One, it was a COVID season, right? The lack of fans for the majority of the year. I think the buy-in level was so high, partially because there was a bunch of guys who might not have been in the league for long after that, right? Alec Burks was there on a minimum, not 1 year, $6 million. Nerlens Noel was there on a 1 year deal, right? All these guys trying to cash in. First year, Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah. Bullock was a free agent.
Yeah, Bullock. Yeah. And second of all, your own Weitzman is a bum, and you can tell him I said that. Don't bring his name up again on this podcast. And so I think since then, I think it might just be easier to say that the Knicks have always played to their talent level, right? Everyone agrees that they wildly overperformed, right? So they've regressed to the mean a little bit. Julius Randle's shooting most likely was never going to stay at 41%, hitting a bunch of step back, off the dribble, self-created threes, right? I remember talking to his trainer, the guy that he worked out with before the year. They were just trying to get to 34%, 35% from three. That's what their goal was, right?
Yeah.
He wildly overperformed. And so they've kind of found their level a little bit since then. And what are they, 37 wins last year? They're like 10 and 12 right now. So there's like roughly the same exact thing. So no one will look at their roster and be like, hey, these guys are just, they're not good. Like they should be so much better. Why are they underperforming? Like this is the talent level, right? And they're playing to it to some degree. And I understand what you're saying about the young guys, but also like they're giving RJ Barrett a lot of minutes, right? Mitchell Robinson is the starting center now. He's playing a lot of minutes. Jalen Brunson, you want to play a lot of minutes.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
right. And so like really the only gripe that seems to come to is the Julius Randle thing. And I'm not advocating for Julius Randle to play 35 minutes a night. But there are still things that he does well that Obi Toppin cannot replicate. And I think the biggest issue with him is that he hasn't played defense as assertively as he did that first year. And that's a legitimate, like, big issue. I'm not diminishing that at all. But he, like, offensively, he's been kind of the same guy the whole 3 years. And maybe the biggest difference is whether the shots go in or not. And Obi Toppin, I like him too. He's shown a lot of growth, like player development. Like, I thought the first 2-3 months when he was in New York, I was like, oof, this pick was not good. But he's played so much better. He's shown so much growth and so much skill development. But I think there's still questions if he's a 35-minute a night starter, especially the way Tom Thibodeau wants to play, or any team that really, really prioritizes defense and playing in the half court, because the Knicks are not a full court kind of team.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where the disconnect is more like when people say the goal, I think they really mean how they're getting to the goal and the particulars, because we live it and breathe it. And we're just like you said at the top of the pod, Mike, it's every day it's something, right? And you're so invested, and there's like 18 Knicks podcasts, and Knicks fans are crazy and listen to all of them somehow. And, you're just...
Actually, regarding that, we had somebody in our Discord today mention that they've mastered listening to podcasts at 2.5x speed, which, like, why? I'm like, okay, so now I understand how you listen to every Knicks podcast.
People have been posting their, like the Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah.
And somebody, I don't remember if it was our pod or Knicks Film School, but it was like 50,000 minutes or something crazy like that. And I was like, no, just put it down, man. Delete Spotify. Like, this is right up there with a drug habit. Like, this is harmful for you, and you're addicted. Get help.
Yeah. But by the way, definitely subscribe to the Patreon.
Also subscribe to the Patreon, to whatever you can, and Instagram and YouTube. But yeah, it's kind of like, I just wonder if they've, at the beginning, what was it, 4 years, and then eventually they added a year to Thibs' contract.
No, so it was reported.
I thought it was 5 at
years.
first.
It might be 5.
It's what
it was 4 plus 1, or
what was reported was a 5-year deal. Then it was reported then that they had guaranteed the last part of it after the first year. But then Begley reported that they had that he's worded it a little bit weirdly, but the way it sounds is that the last year is not guaranteed. So it's probably like he's got one more guaranteed year after this one.
Yeah, 4 plus 1s are pretty common, like coaching deals where the last one is a team option. Cool. I'm not saying that's the case for Thibs, but that kind of aligns with the kind of deals given out.
Yeah. Right. And given the performance in the beginning, it's easy to see them just being like, fuck it, guarantee it. Like, you killed it this year, right? Which you did. So I totally see that. It's just because the superstar acquisition hasn't gone as they wanted it to go in terms of when it happens, then the pivot is just a complete stumble. And I don't think they were really prepared for that as a front office. Like, they're I can say, like, with pretty good I know this. I know this. They did not. Donovan Mitchell was not supposed to. He was not supposed to come on the market this year. That was not the plan. The plan was Donovan Mitchell was next year. That was the plan. So the plan got sped up because Danny Ainge is an asshole. Yeah. So they didn't pivot, and now you've reached that point in the Thibs. Who was it? Haley. She's not. I forget where she's at now. She's not at the Ringer, but she wrote the article. about like the lifespan of Thibs teams and all of that. And it's hilarious and insanely predictive in retrospect, where you hit the point where like goals begin to conflict if other goals are not achieved, and we're right there with the Knicks. And it's just it just manifests in so many big and small ways. Like the Obi thing is another good example. Like you said, Mike, he has developed really well. Like he's a legit plus shooter now, but he
let's see a
also
larger sample size first.
Yeah.
Let's give him more than 20 games.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd put the money on it. He's missed like 2 free throws or something this year, but like either way, even if he's just a solid shooter, like he's come a long way from. Nobody must have airballed more corner threes than Obi Toppin early on, man. He had
not.
the wild depth perception issues in the corner, man.
Not just airballing. I remember he hit the side of the backboard on a corner three. Well, like it was ugly. It was ugly his rookie year.
He still unleashes a nice corner three airball every now and then.
Just for old times.
I remember at one point I was keeping count of it. I think he had more corner three airballs than he did like made corner threes.
It was crazy,
and it was like March. It was like the season.
It was really wild, and now I'm like, oh, cool. Like we know he's not going to be a bad shooter. We can debate about how good of a shooter, but also we don't want him taking only threes. And now he's like Steve Novak discount double check Harlem version or whatever. And it's like, okay, too much in the other direction, Thibs. And it's
to me the Obi thing is like I hear what you're saying with like and I agree with this. Like he has developed players well, and like yes, like he has played RJ Barrett a lot. He has played Mitchell Robinson a lot. It is hard to balance having Randall and getting Obi minutes. I get all that. But like even I watch Obi this year. I haven't looked up the numbers. I can look this up once I'm done yelling about this. But like I'm pretty confident he gets less touches now in pick and roll or just post touches than he ever has. And
it's so insane that the Knicks fan base, like, have you ever noticed talking points, quote unquote talking points among Knicks fans, frustrated complaints that just disappear because we've just like there's just too many other things to bitch about. Like remember Obi Toppin not getting reps as the roll man?
Yeah,
not a peep about that. That's like a relic of yesteryear. Nobody says that on Twitter now.
Yeah, and I think in general, like what really the frustration is like I think Thibs, look, he's definitely. I think they're 10th in pace right now. Maybe it's slower after yesterday. I'm not sure, but I have no idea. And I think that like they have, like you mentioned, modernized the shot chart, right? Those are all completely accurate, no doubt. But to me, I watch them play, and I'm like, it still feels like
more of an eye test kind of guy.
Yeah, no, well, like when I'm just saying, like when you're watching them, like how do they derive those shots, right? How are those shots being generated? It's still the same type of actions. It's still the same. Like there's yesterday, like the amount of times we mismatch hunt with Julius Randle, he is the worst mismatch hunter in the NBA. He is the worst person I've ever watched posting up a mismatch. Yesterday, he's got like Grayson Allen on him on a switch, and he's getting pushed out to 18 feet. Like, why are you gigantic? I hate this. I hate watching this. But like you said, like there are certain things that are Thibs, right? Thibs is going to like mismatch hunt. He, for better or worse, that is a huge part of what he wants to do, especially in end game situations. And like that is like, so when people are just talking about like it feels stagnant, I don't think it's about like the shot chart and yes, players are developing, but you're like, okay, Obi Toppin, since he's come into the league, has been used as like basically a floor spacer. At what point do you do something with him that is like, oh yeah, I remember we drafted this nuclear athlete, crazy short roll passing specimen in that capacity at all? And I think that like it's constantly, I think there's like this weird. Like
there's not a lot of adjustments to the strengths of his players. And I'll give you another example, like conversely, that I noticed the Bucks did and the Grizzlies did versus us. There were times they adjusted
had
how
Giannis
they used,
and they had Ja Morant.
Not Giannis is crazy, man. Like
I think that's the biggest problem is they haven't traded for Giannis or Ja Morant.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna put that out there.
We're just gonna clip that, and then we're gonna clip your own sentiments, and that's it, and put nothing else out into the universe.
Do you think that we should go more than 2 unprotected picks for Giannis?
Just
don't
go
know. Not if you
scour
throw
the
Grimes in
streets
there.
of Greece, man. It's not that hard. Go fucking find malnourished, physical, genetic specimens.
He's in OKC right now. We got to wait for him
Right.
to play his contract out.
I know. But so like
you're waiting on Poku? Yeah. I don't know, man. I think he's gonna get the max. I don't. If OKC doesn't give him the max, I don't know what they're doing anymore.
he's still 18. Allegedly, I don't know.
I think honestly, the Knicks' biggest problem is for all the good, interesting young players that they have. I think that they have almost in a sense too many, and like they should have tried to do a condensed trade earlier. And I understand maybe depth is kind of necessary with Tom Thibodeau because of his kind of 1-for-1 substitution pattern style. But
that no other coach does in the NBA.
No, Doc Rivers does it.
Oh, I forgot about
there you
OG
go. Doc
Glenn.
Rivers does it.
OG Glenn.
But so, I think that at some point you need to condense, right? You need to kind of, especially now is quickly what is year
3.
He's year 3?
Yeah, him
right?
and Obi the same year.
Mm-hmm.
Year 3. So they're all reaching their extensions next year, or the final years of their rookie contract, right? And you're seeing that it not only does it kind of clear up playing time, it kind of makes things easier for the cap going forward. And I think at some point that move has to come for the Knicks. You have to use the young players more as trade assets than you do as the players that they are.
It does, but
don't you have to develop them as trade assets, though. Like that's the part.
That's part of it. But then, like you look around the league,
I think that I understand the development part, and I think if you can, like to your point, if you can say that Emmanuel Quickly is a really good player based off his on-off splits, based on his shooting numbers, based on his just kind of shooting talent, right? And you've seen kind of him outgrow what his draft profile was, and you have some clarity of thought about the type of player that he is. I'm sure there are teams around the league who have similar ideas, right? And it's not necessarily we need to see him play 30 minutes a night to understand that maybe if he gets here in a different spot, he can eventually be that 25, 30-minute night guy. And he's averaged somewhere around like 23, 25 minutes per game, right? Which isn't nothing. He's not like a 12-minute a night backup point guard in another situation. Or Obi Toppin, you see kind of the talent level that he has. And so it's not like you have to play this guy 35 minutes to truly develop him as a prospective trade candidate. Like there are teams that are out there that have their own data that can say, and their own scouts that can say, like, we think this guy is, this good or whatever that level is.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing. It's like we argue over the development, but it's really not a binary, like playing time or not playing time. And you see teams walk that line all the time. Really good teams that are way fucking better than the Knicks, like the Grizzlies, have Santi Aldama, Jake LaRavia, Xavier Tillman last year getting really meaningful minutes. Zaire Williams, like other teams that go legit 10 deep. We've seen it with the Raptors. We've seen it with good teams. We've seen it with bad teams. Like this is literally super common unless a team happens to be extremely top heavy. Like you can actually trust these guys with more minutes, especially with injuries and things like that. In this league, like it's not uncommon.
Yeah, and I think like forgetting the one of the reasons, so even if we're to say, okay, Thibs, like you can't expect any coach to get more than Thibs even is out of these players, right? Let's just say that's accurate. That's true, 100%. This team's 500, no matter who's coaching it. It's like, and this was a complaint last year. This is a complaint his first year, but we were winning more and performing way above expectations, so it didn't matter as much. But like every game feels like you're watching the same game. It's like, okay, 6 minutes this sub, 8 minutes this sub, like, and it's everything is the same.
It's also true with strategic adjustment, and this is what I was gonna say before. So like when the Knicks had Quentin Grimes on ball guys like Drew or John Morant, those teams handled it differently than when the Knicks had Cam Reddish on those guys. When Cam was on those guys, he's a really good point of attack defender, but he's not good at getting around screens because he's really large and he depends on his size and length more than his quick feet. Meanwhile, Grimes has like salsa dancer feet. It's amazing. Like he can just shimmy around these screens like nothing. It's crazy. And they would just as soon as it's like nobody had to call the play. As soon as Cam was out there, you could see the teams switch their plan, go into a high screen with a pitch back because they knew with momentum Cam was not going to get around the screen and then catch up to the ball handler.
Right.
And it was just an automatic read. And like these are young guys. Half the Grizzlies are like 22 or younger. Like these aren't guys who have been learning the ins and outs of defense like Taj Gibson for 12 years or something like that. Like, it's not crazy to
Shout
have
out
these.
Taj. No
Shout out Taj
slander.
forever. Is he getting minutes?
I don't know. I hope he's still shooting corner threes.
The
I
Wiz
will
are
say,
kinda
like,
good, though, so.
if you put someone like quickly relative to his peers, I just looked this up. He's 12th in this draft class in just minutes played, right? And the guys ahead of him are either kind of top 8 picks that just get minutes no matter what, or guys who have really outplayed their draft slot.
So but if you're quickly, right? You came in as a rookie and you were like, okay, I am a backup guard, whatever position. Last year, comes in, same exact role. You told him we want you to develop your point guard skills. He didn't get to play point guard until Rose was injured, and then he was like, okay, you're playing. Like, a lot of this, like, I know that his minutes played look great, but if you're him and if you're just a fan watching this team, to me, it's like there's no progression in his role, and that doesn't need to mean starter, but it does need to mean like, I trust you over 34-year-old Derrick Rose. Like, if we cannot get there as an organization, to me, that's not just a failing of Thibs, but at this point, like, it is a failing on the front office, because, like, what is the plan? Like, to me, that's it is like Thibs, Obi and IQ have been playing the same exact role since they came to the NBA. It's the same role. There's no variation. And like, this is what I was saying is like you can tell me, let's say if Nick Nurse coached the Knicks, okay, let's just say Nick Nurse coaches the Knicks. Maybe you can convince me there. Like, we'll just say he's not getting a single more win out of this team than Thibs would. Okay. But I promise you one thing. If Nick Nurse was coaching this team, we would have seen Obi Toppin at the 2. We would have seen all kinds of combinations. But it's like, that's what I want to see, because you don't have that superstar talent. You don't have the surefire franchise cornerstone dude. So when you're talking about we need to find wins, you need to find edges, you got to find ways to win basketball games. To me, it doesn't feel like we're finding anything. It feels like Thibs is again, I've talked about this before, but it's like Thibs acts like he fucking climbed Mount Sinai and got the 10 commandments from God before training camp, and this is how we're going to play the entire season. And that's that. There's no adjustment. And it's like that, like, I don't need him to give me like point Obi, but I would like to see
David Fizdale talk about playing Knox at the 2, KP at the 3, Mitchell Robinson,
bring him back.
One for
They said he was a madman.
Ran him out of town.
But he was terrible at his job, though. He was terrible at his job.
All this talk about experimentation, he was willing to give you experimentation.
Yeah, he definitely experimented. He experimented with a lot of Moutier. But like, no, but like that is what drives me nuts. Is like, I am totally of the opinion the Knicks do not have like a star franchise cornerstone, and we probably should talk about RJ Barrett, because I think part of the agita that exists on Knicks Twitter has to do with the fact that RJ Barrett has really struggled to start this year.
Mm-hmm.
But like that, to like for the Thibs part of it, like the best way I can encapsulate what my frustrations are, why I just think you need to move on, is like, do I think he's incompetent and bad at like in isolation at his job? No, I think there's a cap to what Thibs can give you as a coach. He's not the guy who's going to take you from ground zero to a championship. That's just not what he is. But what he did is he took you from ground zero and he gave you a floor. He gave you exactly what I think this front office wanted, right? They wanted a guy who's going to deliver some competent moments, maybe turn it into like a, they made the playoffs. Like they got to a certain level, but now like you've outgrown, and maybe that's not just on him. That's also like you haven't given him a star that can kind of like help take his vision to the next level. But like, you're just not on the same page anymore. And where you are as a franchise is not really where he wants to be as a coach. And I think
what
that's
I meant about the pivot. Once you don't get like you, I mean, Shwin is plugged in out here, so I don't doubt that Donnie wasn't on the menu quite yet in their original plans, but like they didn't know how to marry where they were with where Thibs wanted them to be. And Thibs has, we talk about expectations for these players in the front office. Thibs also has expectations.
Yeah.
And I promise you, I'm sure he really, really loves Jalen Brunson, like non-sarcastically. This guy is literally leading the league in drives and paint touches, or paint points, I think, which is like, that's like the Thibs dream, right? In a lot of ways. But
That's crazy. He's 6'1".
He's
got
still
no
not
vert.
done. He's still not. He had that dunk. He got the same amount of blocks as RJ Barrett. Put some respect on his name. They both
Hold
got
on. Just quick digression about Jalen Brunson. I didn't get to see him play much in person like the last few years before he got here, and like you watch him on the TV and all that. But like the few times I've been at MSG this year, and I think I caught him at Barclays for a game, watching Jalen Brunson in person to me is the most fun thing about this Knicks team in a really long time. The way he moves his feet and the artistry that he has and how he plays basketball offensively is it's amazing. Like I don't remember someone who is so interesting and so captivating for something that's like not a highlight reel type of play. It's like you should I don't know if you guys pay attention to it as much as I do, but his footwork is like one of my favorite things about the NBA in general this whole season.
He's got to be, this is like one of my running jokes on Twitter. He's got to be one of the like top 10 most annoying players to guard. Like you got to stay down for like, first of all, you got to be ready for him to accelerate at any given moment from like 0 to 100 and then to stop and go from 100 to 0. And then also you got to worry about like 18 pump fakes in one possession. And even if you get him to stop his dribble, he can still come up with some crazy pivot that like you didn't know that angle mathematically was possible. And even if you predict that, he's going to throw some rainbow fadeaway or floater or just pass it and get the ball back and start the whole dance over again. And nobody has that kind of mental endurance.
It's amazing. His moves, like for a guy who's not that super athletic, the way he moves with the ball is always so violent with his steps. It's just, I don't know. It's captivating to me to watch him play basketball.
I tell people like I bought his jersey. This is the first Knicks jersey I've ever owned because when I was younger, I wasn't like I could get a Carmelo jersey, but I had a Team USA Carmelo jersey, so I had that covered. And like I remember being in high school and being like, do I want an Amari jersey? He's probably gonna get hurt, so I didn't sink my allowance or whatever into that. And since then, I'm like, whose jersey am I gonna get? Like Shump? I don't know. Like shout out Shump, but like I need a jersey that I can have on the court for like 5 years, give or take, at least another contract. And I wasn't sure of that with anyone.
Was J.R. Smith.
The last one you got was JR?
Yeah.
That's that jersey has aged well. I wish
he was fun, man. I'm not gonna lie. His 6th man of the year season of the Knicks was awesome.
JR forever.
Yeah, like we should talk about RJ Barrett, who has shown some signs recently. But I think it's fair to say, like, I don't know if any Prez I know definitely won't disagree with this. I would disagree with it. I don't think you would disagree with this, Mike. Definitely been a really disappointing start to his 4th year in the NBA. How much of like I mean, this is also part of their plan too, and like I think that probably it's hard for them to be like, yeah, our plan was, we're waiting for a star, but RJ is like the guy that we are developing, and it's like you're watching this year and you're like, come on, do something. Like you're like the meme, and it's just brutal to watch.
The frustrating thing about RJ, and I think there's 2 elements that have made Knicks fans just unable to deal with it. One is like he's not a supreme athlete. He didn't come into the league as a sniper, so like you want somebody who you pick and it's just easy. It just happens, right? Like we sort of got that with Kristaps back in the day. But like with RJ, it's like, first he has to shoot, then he has to work on his touch. Also, he has to make the most of his defense, which he doesn't have the most physical tools because he's only 6'6", blah, blah, blah. And there's like 100 other things. And he starts doing that, getting better little by little. And that's cool. But if he regresses like he did so hard at the beginning of this season, it hurts that much more because he doesn't have these just like automatic take it to the bank natural gifts, right? Like you look at someone like Ben Mathurin, who's like, it doesn't matter what happens in his career, he will always be able to shoot the hell out the ball and he'll always be a pretty spectacular athlete. Like all else could fail and those things will remain true. But with RJ, that's not the case. And we've already put him on this platform as previously the 1st or 2nd guy and this year like the 2nd or 3rd guy. And you can't really unring that bell, particularly after paying him, which makes it even harder, right? Like even some Knicks fans were like, do we bench Barrett, RJ? I'm like, no, you don't. Like nobody shitted on him more than I did, but like you can't just bench RJ Barrett just because he's pissing you off with his development. Like if you watch
try me, Prez, try me, pal.
Shwin is like, let me introduce you to my 2K team.
Emmanuel
RJ
quickly, all 5 positions.
Somehow RJ, like the thing for me that made it frustrating wasn't really all of that. It was just that a lot of the issues stemmed from decision making. Like we know he's an okay shooter. He's not gonna be like Ray Allen or something, but you just saw him pressing so much early this year, like missing layups, just taking bad shots, and it all came to a head versus Portland in the first half, where Jeremy Grant drew 9,000 fouls, and RJ even said after the game, he was like, I was trying to get some of that too. And you could see him just jumping into guys, and the refs weren't having it. And then something happened, and then in the second half of that game, he finally started laying off just playing more in the flow and beginning to actually pass the ball when he drew attention, which is like, I don't know. It's amazing because even with his slump, he still drew lots of defensive attention. He just was like, nope, I'm going up. I'm shooting through it. And
I think the difficulty like this year with the Knicks offense and the way that they play, right? For what as much as I love watching Jalen Brunson play, like his staccato nature of like playing basketball is not easy to play off of, I imagine. Right? It's not a guy who just cuts to the rim and he's like straight line getting there. You can cut, you can move to a spot on the perimeter, know that he'll find you for a 3. You have to like he's playing jazz and you got to figure out where the beats are and like to figure out how to play.
You got to be able to read it. 100% true. Great point.
And Julius Randle has always played that way too. Even like when things are going well, he'd be just making decisions at the last moment, making passes and deciding where to go after he leaves his feet. I think that happened in Milwaukee or against the Bucks last night, where he got called for an up and down. I think he left and tried. Was that the other night, 2 nights ago, whatever it was?
Julius improvises because he has no choice, and he's just like, oh shit. But Jalen Brunson is legit. You're like, I know he has a plan, but I don't know what the plan is.
I was shaking my head because you were right.
I assume it's really hard to play off of that. And like Mitchell Robinson he's a very skilled offensive rebounder, but he needs to be near the basket. And RJ Barrett needs to be near the basket to be at his most efficient. And then if the shot's just not dropping, and this year, like just been, even the catch and shoot threes are completely off for him.
So that's why the passing is something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I haven't calculated yet, but I want to go look at because I know we're really high up there in drives and paint points, and I want to look at the ratio of that to like passes and assists. I'm sure Second Spectrum or something has like kickouts, and you can look this up, but like it's got to be pretty rare to be in the paint this much and not pass like we do. Like Julius is having a much better offensive season, but one thing that has come down is his passing, right? His turnover is about 1-to-1 at like 3-3 or 4-3 or 4-4 or something like that. And RJ spent most of this season just not with zero interest in passing until the last 4 games, thankfully. And if you're going to have this real Thibsy style of drive to the hoop, pressure on the hoop, like Thibs talks about this. He's like, look, you draw attention and you pass the ball, right? Like this is that's also part of the Thibs game plan. He wants his players to be assertive and drive, but if you ask him like, yeah, should we kick out, like drive and kick? Yes, that's his thing. That's been his thing since Aaron Brooks and Nate Robinson were doing it. It's not a secret. And I don't think it's a surprise that now that RJ Barrett is finally driving not to draw fouls, but to score or to pass, you're seeing the offense
flow.
It's flowing relative to what it was before. This isn't like nobody's gonna confuse this with like the fucking Warriors or something, but like
sure, I don't
know. Only if we play the Pistons. Have we played the Pistons like 100 times? Are we done with Pistons games?
We got one more Pistons game, which is gonna bring up our offensive rating. Real nice.
We need to bank that for later in the year. They put them all too close together.
I think that's a reason why Grimes stands out though too. He's super instant. Everything he does is quick decision. Yeah. There's no hesitation, whether it's shoot, whether it's drive, whether it's pass. He had a catch yesterday in the corner. He just blew by. I forgot who it was that closed out on him. I think it might have been Brook Lopez. He just blew by him and yammed that thing. I was like, and it was like that. But you like, I mean, I'm curious. Like Mike, you said you haven't gone to too many Knicks games. I'm curious. Did you go at the start of did you go to a game at the start of the year at all?
I went to a preseason game. I think I was there for the Hornets game, which was the start of the year.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Like, you saw RJ last night, obviously. Did he look? Do you think he's looked more athletic and quick as you've gone on? Like from when you first saw him live to now? Because me and Prez talked about this. I think all Knicks fans have talked about this. He looked really slow. And it wasn't just like during that time when he was sick. It was also before and after it also. And then like last few games, he's looked a little bit quicker, a little bit more explosive. Have you seen that at all live, or am I just, or you just don't really?
It's just not something I've thought about. But that, I mean, that's an interesting, like, why do you think that will be? Like, do you think that, have you noticed?
I think he got too jacked, man. That's my theory.
I think he got too jacked.
I think he was like, in the second half last year, he started driving. Like, he was 5th in the league in the second half in drives per game, and his usage was 30. And I don't even think it's like a bad decision or anything. He probably was like, I'm going to have to take a lot of damage next year. Let me build up some armor here. But this man could gain muscle like a football player, so he might have went a little too hard in the weight room there. And, it's nobody expects him to be slim like when he was at Duke or something, but you got to find that middle ground.
I mean, maybe that was, he just thought that he needed to be bigger this year and to take the contact, if he's going to drive to the rim so much and get out some contact.
I was talking to somebody else who knows way more than I do about fitness. Shout out to Omar in the Discord. And another factor is, and maybe this is what you're alluding to, Shwin, is like, guys gain weight, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but you lose over the course of the season because the workload just as an athlete is insane. So you gain weight knowing that, by the All-Star break, if RJ came in at 235, he's not going to be 235 at the All-Star break. It's just impossible with the grueling season. So, if he starts to lighten up, that might be a part of it. I don't know.
I have no idea. I hope that's part of it, because that would be great if he gets more athletic through the season. Real quick though, the NBA season's heating up, and there's still so many unknown possibilities. Who knows? Can the Knicks run the table and win the Atlantic Division? Probably not. When I'm looking to get in on the action, I bet with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers can bet just $5 pre-game money line on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Check this out. Right now, everyone can earn up to a 100% boost with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place a same-game parlay, and combine multiple bets, which team will win, total rebounds, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. Download the app now, sign up with code TBPN, place a $5 pre-game moneyline bet on any NBA team to win their game, and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's code TBPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
That was a smooth ad read. I didn't realize you'd been bought off by big sportsbook too.
Oh yeah. We're just corporate now. We really sold our soul, and we're just here for the dollar at this point.
I can't knock the hustle. No one's out here doing this for free.
Yeah, I mean, I want to. I guess I don't know what your thoughts are here on Randall. I know he's played better this year, but like,
what do you think? What do you think? Here's one thing that I legit like. I'm not gonna armchair psychologist any of these guys, but like the defense stuff is just, yes, it's frustrating, but even beyond that, isn't it just kind of weird?
With Randall?
Yeah, like this season, it's one thing. Like, think of like Amari, right? Like, he was kind of just oblivious, but Randall has moved beyond obliviousness to like, there's so many times he just doesn't put his hand. He's just like, it's like the last game of a pickup run where he's just like, I'm just here to finish my run up and go home or whatever on defense, and he won't do the rotation. He just kind of floats in no man's lands, and I don't know that I've seen something like that, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird to me.
I think like the way that Randall plays defense his first year in New York and like this year is probably closer to the way that he's always played throughout his career. And so maybe that first year with Thibs was more anomalous and just probably harder to maintain that type of that energy and that type of concentration all season long if it's not your kind of default way of playing defense.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then if you add on top of that like his time on the Knicks, he's been basically a wing, and before that, he's never been a wing. So you
Yeah.
combine that with a very laissez-faire, however you say that, attitude towards defense in general, and maybe this is what you get. This is one of those frustrating things, because like we talk about, is Obi ready to play defense for all these minutes? But Obi is closer to a different type of questionable defender where it's not the effort, it's knowing where he has to be. It's, does he have the agility to change directions? He was the slowest backpedaler in the world when he came into the league, and he's done a bunch of yoga since then. Credit to him. He looks a lot more smooth when he's moving out there. But like, even limited agility Obi with effort is, to me, he easily clears Randall on defense, even if guys might push him around because he's not as strong. Like it's not even close to me, which is one of the weird things about like the whole, like, is he ready for a bigger load kind of thing? Because it's not like the incumbents are really out here blowing it out, And that's, I think, the other frustration is like, nobody's saying don't play. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say that. Lots of people are saying don't play Julius, but like, just bring it down to 30 minutes and give him a breather, right? If maybe that's what it takes to let him play more defense intensely throughout the game. But Thibs doesn't want to make that offensive trade-off, and front office is cool with that. So I guess that's why.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, like, the way that I kind of look at what Thibs does decision-making wise is that he is kind of small c conservative about everything, right? And so, there are more question marks, I'd say, about Obi and about playing those two guys together than there are about the styles that have worked for him throughout his career, about even someone like Julius Randle, about understanding like Evan Fournier, and he's got like a longer track record of being a good NBA player, what he's done, than say like a Quentin Grimes or something like that. And even his allegiance to Derrick Rose, like he's last year was bad and he got hurt, but the year before that, like
he was spectacular,
maybe the MVP.
Yeah.
And he's this season is I forget how many games this season he came back, but I'm sure Thibs is trying to give him time to get back into shape and see if he has his form, and maybe, I don't think so, but maybe down the line he cuts his minutes a little bit. But like, that's, if you think about it, like that's, I think, his way of thinking is like kind of conservative and more about loss and risk aversion than it is kind of trying to move the ante up.
Yeah, I think that's why you see a lot of his more dramatic strategic changes come season to season rather than in season, right? Like those dramatic shot profile shifts that have happened literally every year. Yeah, like there's definitely a reason those don't happen in season, and they do off season, because that's just how he approaches it in terms of like small sample size, and he's not buying it unless he's really seen it for a long time.